enjoyed learning from you, and we are so grateful for your time.
Well, thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for being here. And we have a great show for you tonight to teach you a little bit about the history of Portland. And here we go.
Of a city, Portland. This is the story of how people came and settled in this area, and how over time they built a great city.
It is a story about good times and bad times. It is a story about how people like you and me can help other people and make life better for everyone in our city.
For thousands of years, Native American tribes roamed the area we now call Portland. The tribe that lived in our area was known as the Multnomas.
The Multnomas had many settlements in our area. The largest settlement was on Suvie Island, which was called Wapato Island, from the Wapato root that grew on the island. The tribe used the Wapato plant much like we use potatoes today.
In order to harvest Wapato, members of the tribe would wade into the shallow water and feel around with their bare feet for a hard bump. When they found one, that was a Wapato root.
There was also a lookout on Council Crest, very near to where the Healy Heights Tower is today.
And there is a clearing next to a beautiful river they call Willamette,
which in their language meant River of Peace. That little clearing was the start of Portland.
In the year 1804, two explorers named Lewis and Clark began a journey from St. Louis, Missouri to reach the Pacific Ocean.
They took along 30 other men, a Native American woman named Sacagawea, and her little baby. They also took along Clark's manservant York and Lewis's great big dog.
In 1805, they crossed the Rocky Mountains and traveled down the Columbia River to the ocean.
They had a very difficult trip. They almost starved to death, but they made it to the Pacific Ocean in November of 1805. Then they returned to Missouri in September of 1806.
On April 3, 1806, Captain Clark and 7 other men took a journey down the Willamette River. He was the first American to see the area we now call Portland. They stood on the bluff where the University of Portland is today.
Oh yeah, like these guys who traveled all that way. Come on.
Well, according to history, they did.
No way they had to travel over 4,000 miles by walking or by canoe. No one could do that. Get real.
It was real, and I bet I can prove it.
How?
We'll read you something from their journals.
They had to write in journals too?
Yes, the President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, ordered Lewis and Clark to write every day in their journals.
Here is what we wrote when we were close to Portland. November 10th, 1805. Rained very hard last night and continues this morning. We are all wet or bang and many other articles. November 12th, 1805. All wet and cold. Our bedding also wet. Fortunately, the men are healthy. November 14th, 1805. The rain continues all morning. All wet.
Okay, I get the picture. I guess they were in Portland.
Lewis and Clark published their journals, which told people in the East about Oregon. Soon others came and found that farmland in the Willamette Valley was some of the best land on earth. And they told other people.
And they told other people. And they told other people. The first explorers were fur trappers. They especially hunted and trapped for beaver because the fur from the beaver was very valuable. Let me introduce you to one of the most famous early settlers, Dr. John McLaughlin.
Dr. McLaughlin was a very tall man.
Hello, I'm Dr. John McLaughlin. I'm head of the Hudson's Bay Company for this region. At first I lived in Fort Vancouver, but then I moved on to Oregon City. Fur traders come to me with lots of different furs, and I buy them and send them to England where they're highly priced.
Dr. McLaughlin, here are some elk hides.
Very good, Richard. You can make a lot of things out of elk.
And here's some raccoon furs.
Fine, but raccoon isn't very valuable, but you can still make a hatch from raccoon. What do you have, James?
Dr. McLaughlin, I watched his skunk fur, and I don't think it smells too bad.
Yes, it does. I don't think we can use that. What else do we have?
Beaver pelts.
Excellent. The beaver pelts are very valuable. But you know what's sad? The beaver is such an interesting animal.
Especially the way it builds its dams. Beavers are always cutting down trees, and luckily, in the Northwest, we have a lot of trees, so we have a lot of beavers.
For over 10,000 years, Native American tribes called Oregon home. They lived in peace and harmony of nature.
The descendants of these tribes were very proud people. They worked hard to keep Native American languages, tradition, and culture alive.
The 1830s were a very difficult time for the Native American tribes in Oregon. When the fur trappers came to Oregon, the trappers brought flu disease. By the 1830s, almost the entire Multnomah tribe had died of flu and other diseases that white men carried.
The native tribes in Oregon had no immunities to these diseases. Dr. McLaughlin tried to find a cure that would save the lives of the Multnomahs, but most of the tribe died.
This was such a tragic time for all of us. I made many friends amongst the tribe. None of my medicines could help stop the flu.
By 1843, thousands of settlers were traveling to Oregon on what became known as the Oregon Trail. You traveled with oxen, horses, and everything they owned in the covered wagons.
Life on the trail was hard. There were many dangers. Many people died of diseases, but they journeyed on in hopes of finding good land in Oregon.
Women on the trail had to cook, clean, and sew all the clothes for the family. Sometimes unexpected things happened.
One woman wrote in her journal,
Last night, my clothes got out of the wagon and the ox ate them up.
And then, like any journey, the kids always asked questions.
Get its name, well, let me introduce you to Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Overton.
Do you remember that clearing by the Willamette River? Well, Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Overton claimed it belonged to them. It probably was not fair, but the government in Oregon City sold them the land for only 25 cents.
Well, Mr. Overton, 25 cents for all this land. I think we did quite well.
Yes, Mr. Lovejoy, we did. Perhaps someday people will build a few houses here. Maybe a little town. Why, someday, maybe even a great city will be here.
Whoa, don't get ahead of yourself. I mean, there's nothing here but some open land and a river. I mean, this place doesn't even have a name. It's just called the clearing.
Yes, but we could build the dock for ships, and then the town would grow.
And Mr. Overton was right. A few houses were built on the spot. But soon Mr. Overton wanted to leave to go to California, so he sold his half of the land to Mr. Pettygrove.
But he did not tell Mr. Pettygrove that he only paid pennies for its original. Step right up, Mr. Pettygrove, and buy this beautiful town.
Pardon me for asking, but where is the town?
Well, I know there are only a couple of houses in the clearing, but hey, you have to use your imagination.
For a mere $50, I'll sell you all this land. You'll never regret it. Best land in the world.
Well, $50 seems like a lot of money for a town that doesn't even have a name. I don't know. I think I'm out.
Now hold on, Pettigrove. At this price, I'm really saving you some money. And just for you, I'll throw in these beautiful trees for free.
Okay, Mr. Overton, $50 it is, but I've got to tell you something. I won't pay a penny more.
So now the town was owned by Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Pettigrove, but it still had one big problem. It didn't have a name.
You know, Mr. Lovejoy, this sure is a nice town, but it really needs a name. Let's see, what could we call this place?
I know. Let's name it after another town. That's what the Pilgrims did when they came to America. They named their towns after towns in England.
That's a good idea. Let's see, what could we call it?
Let's name it Boston, after my hometown of Massachusetts. After all, Boston is a great city, and we want this one to be as well.
Mr. Lovejoy, I'm from Maine, and we don't think much of Boston and Maine. I suggest we name it Portland, after a very fair city in Maine.
See here, Mr. Pettigrove. I really think it should be called Boston. After all, Boston is a bigger and more important city than your itty-bitty Portland.
Now see here, Mr. Lovejoy, Portland, Maine is a much more beautiful city than your ugly, stinking Boston.
It should be called Boston. That's final.
No, it should be called Portland, and that's final.
Boston.
Portland.
Boston.
Portland.
Boston.
Portland.
Break it up, break it up. You stand over there, you over there.
Hey, I've got an idea. Let's flip a coin. Best out of 3. Agreed?
Okay, best 2 out of 3. That's fair.
Okay, you call it.
Heads. Tails.
Well, tails it is. Call it again.
Heads.
Tails.
No way, that's unfair. Let's do it over again.
Red card for bad sportsmanship. Get out of here. Pettigrove is the winner fair and square.
And so the town was named Portland. By 1850, more and more houses were built. A newspaper was started. A dock was built and Portland became a major port. Many trees were cut down and the clearing was expanded. But soon Portland got another name, Stumptown. You see, when the men cut down the trees, they often left the stumps still in the ground.
Well, good morning, Jessica and Abigail. Isn't this such a lovely Are you alright? I'm so tired of these stumps in the roads. I wish the men would just pull them out.
That's right. Those men are so lazy. All they do is drink beer. They don't care that no one can walk downtown without bumping into these awful stumps.
And did you hear what other towns are saying about us? We're the laughing stock of the West. They call us Stumptown.
The summer of 1873 was very hot, very hot. It was also very dry. It was 4 a.m. in the morning, August 2nd, 1873. Suddenly, a man came running out of a warehouse.
fire spread quickly. All the buildings and houses were made of wood and were very close together. Fire departments from as far away as Vancouver and Salem came to help fight the fire.
The firemen tried to put out the fire, but they couldn't. When the fire finally burned out, 22 blocks had been destroyed.
This event was known as the Great Fire. It changed a lot of things about Portland. More buildings downtown were made of bricks and weren't put so close together anymore.
Unlike many other western towns, the people in Portland helped each other.
They helped to rebuild the town. They took care of each other.
They looked out for each other, and that's something Portlanders do. Have always done.
Do you hear that?
Hear what?
The train's coming, the train's coming.
Oh no, we better start building the tracks, this track right.
The railroad arrived in Portland in 1883, and Union Station was completed in 1896. Now people could travel across the entire country from New York to Portland just in 12 days instead of months.
Many Chinese workers were hired to build these railroads, who then settled in what is now Portland's Chinatown.
During the late 1800s, Portland's Chinatown was the second largest Chinese settlement in the United States.
The railroad brought people and goods to Portland. The town grew to over 98,000 by the year 1900.
Buildings began to spring up everywhere. Bridges like the old Morrison and Hawthorne Bridge were built.
A trolley system was built so that people could travel downtown.
Because boats had to go up and down the river, all the bridges were drawbridges. The people had to watch the bridges go up and down.
Fun.
Portland is officially the city of roses, and our great festival each year in June is the Rose Festival.
The Rose Festival has 3 parades with horses, floats, and of course, marching bands.
The Rose Festival started in 1907. In 2007, we celebrated the 100th birthday for the Rose Festival.
Our International Rose Test Garden in Washington Park is known around the world.
Roses can be found throughout Portland. Portlanders take great pride in growing roses.
Portland's oldest rose garden can be found in beautiful Peninsula Park in North Portland.
Here's a song about roses that was sung at the first Rose Festival in 1907.
No beautiful palace that lie on the hill, no pictures hang on my wall, but never a painter could match with the skill the roses that bloom in my halls. Then sing me a song of a rose, a song that is tender and true. She wears her red robes like the daintiest queen, all gleaming with jewels of dew. Then sing me a song of a rose, a song that is tender and true. She wears her red robes like the daintiest queen, all gleaming with jewels of dew.
Everywhere downtown, theaters were being built. By 1900, there were grand luxury theaters all along Broadway Avenue in Portland.
There were no TVs or radio at this time, so for entertainment, everyone went downtown to see a show.
Are you going downtown today, Julie?
Why, of course, Liza. I'm taking the trolley downtown to see the new play at the Orpheum Theater.
But that's the most expensive theater in town. Why, I heard it costs 5 cents to see the play. I'd rather go see the symphony at the Markham Theater myself, or one of those funny silent motion picture shows at the Liberty. You know, there are so many choices.
That's right, there are so many choices. You just wouldn't go downtown without saying something, now would you?
Nice song. Where have I heard that music before?
Maybe the ice cream truck in the summer?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, the real name of the tune is The Entertainer, and it was written by an African American composer named Scott Joplin. This music was called ragtime, which later became jazz.
Did you know that Portland is a very important jazz city?
In the 1930s and 40s, there were jazz clubs both downtown and along Williams Avenue in North Portland.
The clubs on Williams Avenue feature some of the greatest African American jazz musicians of the day.
Sadly, most of the clubs either closed or were torn down to make way for the Rose Quarter and also Interstate 5 Freeway.
Portland is still a great jazz town.
Thanks to the wonderful tradition, almost every great jazz musician in the world has played in Portland.
Do you have a brother or sister?
Do you have ever fight with your brother or sister?
Well, we have a story to tell you about a very famous fight between a brother and sister in the early 1900s.
The brother's name was Harvey Scott. The sister was Abigail Scott, who later married a Mr. Dunaway, so her full name was Abigail Scott Dunaway.
What were they fighting about?
They were fighting about women's rights, or what was called women's suffrage.
In 1852, the Scott family left Illinois by covered wagon and arrived in Oregon 6 months later. Harvey Scott was 14 and his sister Abigail was 19.
Harvey Scott became a lawyer and then the editor of Henry Piddock's, the newspaper The Oregonian, a position he held for nearly 50 years.
Harvey published his opinions in the paper, and a lot of people believe what he said.
Harvey disliked anything that suggested social progress. For example, he did not think children should go to school beyond elementary school.
If they want their children to go to school beyond age 12, let them pay. Public schools should not be turned into nurseries for idleness.
Abigail became a teacher on the handmaking business, and published her own newspaper got a new note where she was her opposite, in that she was a supporter of human rights, especially women's rights.
We need to build a better world for all women. We work at the kitchen sinks without wages. We're at the cooking stove, the rolling pin, the wash tub, and the ironing board. Always without pay. They should at least have the right to vote.
We don't want belligerent females, cluck cluck clucking, sitting hens, deciding our fate. Ignorant voters will be dangerous.
I've always heard the difference between a man and a mule was that a man could change his mind. We're the only state in the West where women still cannot vote. It is high time the men of this state give us this right. But Harvey was as stubborn as a mule. Every time an election was held, he wrote article after article telling the men not to let the woman have the right to vote.
When will we get the right to vote over my dead body?
Well then, Harvey, my dear brother, I guess I'll just have to live longer than you.
And she did!
Abigail Scott Dunaway worked for 40 years to win the right for a woman to vote. In 1912, 2 years after Harvey died, the women's suffrage act passed in Oregon.
We think that she would have liked this next song.
The year was 1918. World War I had just ended. The soldiers were returning home, and then came the Great Flu.
Thousands of Portlanders got very sick. Concerts and shows were canceled. Many public buildings were turned into hospitals.
Medicines were not very good in those days. Many people died. The flu was very serious.
But everybody helped each other, just like they did after the Great Fire, and by the early 1920s, the flu was over, and the businesses were good, really good.
The theaters reopened. More and more were built. Everyone went down to see movies. And then there was radio.
The radio brought news.
In the news today, President Coolidge dedicated a statue in Washington, D.C.
The radio also forecasted the weather.
Rain today, mixed with showers. Showers tomorrow, followed by rain, and turning into rain tomorrow night.
And also entertainment.
And now it's time for the Lone Ranger. In this episode, the Lone Ranger is on his trusty horse, Silver. Suddenly, Silver stops and neighs. A shot rings out. The cows in the nearby field get very scared. The Lone Ranger looks out from behind a rock. Tune in next week to find out what happens.
Was founded by a man named James John.
James John lived alone, except he had a cat. When he died, he gave all his money to the school district.
He became quite wealthy, operating a rowboat ferry company to take people and goods between the towns of Lytton and St. John's.
But he had a dream of a bridge.
The St. John's Bridge was built in 1931, long after James John had died.
And what a bridge it is.
The St. John's Bridge is an Oregon treasure.
Here to tell us about the bridge are two designers of the bridge.
I'm Holton D. Robinson.
And I'm David B. Steiner.
The St. John's Bridge is a very special kind of bridge called the cable suspension bridge. Suspension bridges can reach long distances.
At the time it was built in 1931, it had the longest suspension span in the world.
Aside from being a very strong bridge that can handle cars and heavy trucks, it was also very beautiful.
We decided to make the arches of the Gothic form like this. If you walk under the bridge, it looks like you are sitting in an old cathedral.
That's why the park underneath the bridge is called Cathedral Park.
All of the bridges that we have designed, I think this is my favorite bridge. Will always be the St. John's Bridge.
Over the river fair, its cable suspended in air.
1929, the radio brought this news.
Today, the New York Stock Exchange collapsed. Millions of dollars have been lost. Millions of people have been out of work.
This was the start of the Great Depression. Times became really hard. Many banks closed so people couldn't get their money. Thousands of people lost their homes.
Then a great man came along. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk because he had a disease called polio. He was very kind. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said,
Let me assure, it's my firm belief that the only thing to fear is fear itself. I have a plan to put people back to work, and we're calling a plan the New Deal.
In 1932, Roosevelt won the election for president, and things got better, much better.
there are two Roosevelt projects near us in Portland, Bonneville Dam and Timberline Lodge. Roosevelt himself came to Oregon in 1937 to dedicate these projects.
There was a song he used to sing, and the whole country sang it too. It made people feel good and forget the depression. It went like this.
Broadcast at 7 a.m. today, December 7th, 1941. Planes from the Empire of Japan have attacked the United States Pacific Fleet, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Thousands of American sailors are dead. The battleship Arizona has been completely destroyed. Stay tuned for more developments.
When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the United States went to war against Japan and her ally, Nazi Germany. This was known as World War II.
Portland played a very important part during World War II. Ships were built in Portland for the war, thousands of ships.
After Pearl Harbor was bombed, many Americans worried that Japanese Americans might be spies for Japan, although it was never proven that any of them were actual spies.
In February of 1942, an event in Washington, D.C. changed forever the lives of Japanese American citizens that lived in Portland and the West Coast.
Extra, read all about it. All Japanese must move out of town, extra.
The United States government in Washington, D.C. ordered all Japanese American citizens to move inland and not live near the West Coast.
All Japanese Americans living in Portland had to move. This event was known as the Japanese internment.
Many of these citizens who had done nothing wrong lost everything they owned, including their homes and their businesses.
And it was very sad to say goodbye to their friends.
I don't know why we must move. It's awful. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. We have to go to a prison camp in Idaho. Goodbye.
I hope after the war we'll see each other again. Goodbye.
I go to school, same as you. I'm an American too. I go to school, same as you. broadcast to bring you today's news, August 15th, 1945. The Empire of Japan has surrendered to the Allied forces under General MacArthur. The war is over.
Hip hip hooray! During World War II, a new city was built in North Portland. It was called Vanport because it was between Portland and Vancouver along the Oregon side of the Columbia River.
Most of the people who lived in Vanport helped build ships for the war. These ships were called Liberty ships.
Vanport was very important to the African American community. Because of segregation laws, most African Americans in Portland were not allowed to live in the same communities as whites.
But in Vanport, African Americans and whites lived in the same town. And through their hard work and talents, they built thousands of ships for World War II.
Where is Vanport town? Where is Vanport now? When the war ended, the workers and the Liberty ships weren't needed. People moved away.
This is emergency alert. We just received the word that Vanport is flooding. Any able vehicles should proceed to North Denver Avenue to help rescue survivors. I repeat, this is emergency. Vanport's flooding.
In May of 1948, there was a terrible flood. In only a few hours, the entire town of Vanport was destroyed.
This was especially Vanport was never rebuilt, and all the families that lived there had to find new housing.
It was especially difficult for the 6,000 African Americans living in Vanport at this time. They lost everything they owed and no place to live. Due to a policy called redlining, African Americans could only buy houses in the Albina section of Portland.
But then things only got worse for the African Americans living in the Albina neighborhood. When I-5 freeway was built in the 1960s, many houses and businesses in Albina were torn down to make way for the freeway.
In the 1970s, many houses were torn down to build an expansion for the Emmanuel Hospital. However, the expansion was never built.
If you go to Johnson Park across from the Emmanuel Hospital, you'll see a gazebo with beautiful covering. This covering was originally the tower from one of the buildings in Albina that was torn down.
At least the tower was saved as a way to remember all that was lost.
Where did the city go? Floods washed the town away.
Who lived in Vanport town? Who lived in Vanport town?
Workers to build the ships.
What ships did the workers build?
Great ships for liberty.
What happened to this nice town?
Floods washed the town away.
How did the people feel?
1950s, the United States fought a war in Korea.
Then during the 1960s, the United States was again at war, this time at a place called Vietnam.
When the war started, most Americans supported it, but when the war seemed like it would never end, Americans stopped supporting it.
Tragically, over 40,000 American soldiers and sailors died in the Vietnam War. Many Portlanders did not think the war. They protested, they marched through the streets.
They held rallies and sent to Mark Hatfield spoken against the war.
And they sang, here's a protest song they used to sing. It's called Blowing in the Wind. On May 18th, 1980, this event occurred.
I'm standing here just outside the red zone at Mount St. Helens. This morning, the mountain literally blew apart, sending ash over 50,000 feet into the air. Back in Portland, Richard Ross is standing by in our studios.
Well, it was a beautiful clear Sunday morning, but now the sky is gray with ash. People advised to wear masks and not to drive. The ash is very slippery. There have been many traffic accidents already.
Boiling hotter than anything that you've ever found.
ashes, and before long, they were talking about other projects.
In 1981, a group of people wanted to build a square in the middle of the town.
The square would be used for all sorts of activities, concerts, speeches, and of course, the holiday tree.
This plan for a square is great, but how are we going to pay for it?
The square would be used for all sorts of activities. The square would be very popular with everyone. It would be kind of like Portland's living room.
Except there was one problem.
This plan for a square is great, but how are we going to pay for it? You know all those bricks cost money.
I've got an idea. Everyone who wants to help build the square can buy a brick and we'll put the person's name on it.
Sounds good to me.
And that's just what they did.
So if you're downtown at Pioneer Courthouse Square, look down and see if you can see all the names on the bricks.
Each person whose name is on that brick purchased that brick to help build the square.
Citizens in Portland make a difference. Here are some students who have presentations about special citizens in Portland that have made a difference.
My presentation is about Simon Benson. Simon Benson became wealthy in the timber business and built a great hotel. He didn't like Portlanders drinking beer, especially when Portland's water was so pure, so he donated 40 beautiful water fountains all downtown. These fountains are called Benson Bubblers.
My presentation is about Dr. Dinovo Unthink. For many years, Dr. Unthink was the only African-American doctor in Portland. He treated patients of any race or color. Some of those patients had no money to pay him, but he treated them anyway because it was the right thing to do. In 1958, the Oregon Medical Society named him Doctor of the Year.
My presentation is about Bill Nato. Bill Nato is a Japanese American, and his parents went to Japanese internment camps during World War II. The family lost their home and business, but Bill, along with his brother Sam, went to fix up old buildings. They redeveloped much of Old Town and helped to build China Gates and Chinese Garden. My presentation is about Arlene Snitzer. Miss Snitzer is a proud member of Portland's Jewish community. In 1984, she gave money to save one of Portland's oldest theaters. And make it into a beautiful concert hall. It is where the great big Portland sign is downtown. My presentation is about Stephen Skidmore. In the late 1800s, Mr. Skidmore owned a drugstore in Old Town. He was a very kind man and loved animals. One day, he noticed that horses did not have a good place to drink water, so he bought a beautiful fountain for the city.
The Skidmore Fountain can be found near the Burnside Bridge in Old Town. The words on the Skidmore Fountain say, "Good citizens are the riches of the city."
In 1996, there were also some good citizens.
In 1996 it snowed, then it rained. It rained a lot, even for Portland.
The rain melted all the snow. All the water started to flow into the rivers.
And the rivers began to rise and rise and rise.
Mayor Vera Katz said,
People help us. We must build a wall to save the town.
And people did help. People came from all over to build a wall downtown.
and people did help because thousands of people also helped clean up after the flood.
Nobody made them do it. They did it on their own because they were good citizens.
And that's because they were Portlanders.
Portlanders have always helped each other, and hopefully they always will.
In a second, the kids will go off row by row, but I wanted to acknowledge some folks. First of all, thank you to the All Saints community for supporting us, for doing this show. If you're a parent and you helped work lines, thank you for all your help. And we've had some amazing parents, and they keep wandering back with the bags, but who have been working on the costumes and backstage. But let's give them a great big round of applause. Even though I suspect they're going to be upstairs, but they will come back downstairs in a minute. And anyway, this is a fun show. You guys did a great job. So give them a round of applause. Yeah. A couple of people to thank, and I have a funny feeling that my wife has headed up the stairs. But Mrs. Nelson, my dear wife, this show was originally written for her and her students at Kelly Elementary School, which is out in outer southeast. When Kelly lost their music teacher in the late 90s, we said, well, maybe we could do a show together. And that's how the show started and how it was born. It's since been done in about 40 of the elementary schools within the whole Portland area. Portland Public Schools, a number of the Catholic schools do this show. There's schools in Beaverton and in Sherwood that do it. I don't know why, they're not Portland, but that's a whole other matter. But they seem to like to do the show. So, and then I've written other shows for other grade levels as well. But Sue is the one who puts together the costumes and is an integral part of this team. And at some point, she's going to wander back down here, and we can give her applause. If she's not backstage already, Sue, are you back there? No, she took the costumes upstairs. Anyway, why don't we give her a round of applause in absentia, because she does a really fabulous, fabulous job with that. I want to thank, in particular, the teachers. We've missed having Miss Harrington here this time. I do have some flowers, though, for her substitute, and which if Mrs. Gonzalez will take to her tomorrow. And Mrs. Gonzalez, you've put this all together this year, and so a huge thank you to you and for everything that you've done for these guys. So come on up. I've got some flowers for you, my friend. And Sue and the volunteers will be coming back. Why don't we give them a round of applause? Again, you missed your round of applause before. So at this point, I get to tell you how you're going to find your kids, because we would really like you to take them home. Otherwise, they're going to be washing dishes at our house, which they're not going to like doing. And so they're going to go out, they're going to bow row by row, and then they're going to go out, and they're going to go back up to the classroom, and they're going to get changed. And we need about 10 minutes or so, at least, for that to happen. And then if you would like to come kind of wander up, chat along the way, give us a little bit of time, and then we need to check them out from the various rooms. And the boys are in 3B, and the girls are in 3A. And there are checkout lists there. We want to be sure that everybody gets home safely. So, without further ado, I present to you the third grade class in the year 2018. And here you go.